my name is Richard Todd. I've been studying the music and the scores of Maya Badian for about a year now, and I'd like to share some of my impressions with you. I understand that later on this video that Dr. Badian will be presenting her Holocaust Symphony, which I've been just listening to. She'll be presenting it on her new CD, as a matter of fact, which is called Fate, Life, and Death. It's a wonderful effort, a wonderful symphony, a good recording, and it's available now. So much for the commercial. I think I'll talk a little bit more about some of Dr. Badian's other music, because I certainly couldn't give you the kind of in-depth analysis or appreciation of it that you'll get from listening to Dr. Badian present it herself. She has written many works, more than 50, I believe. In fact, considerably more than 50, although when she emigrated to Canada from Romania, the authorities there would not allow her to bring the entirety of her work. So we are stuck, I should say stuck, very pleasantly stuck, but unfortunately we are limited to about half of her overall output in what we can actually hear. And in this real world where it is difficult to hear contemporary music performed at all, the opportunities are not very great for hearing the work of this important composer. I've just selected a number of scores almost at random from the several that are in my collection. One is a concerto for timpani, trumpet, and string orchestra. A fine piece, brilliantly orchestrated, particularly given the limitations of the instrumentation. A more fascinating work still is a concerto called Reflets Laurentiens, that is to say, Reflections of the Laurentians. It's a concerto in 3 movements based on impressions of 3 paintings of Laurentian scenery. It's quite interesting from 2 points of view. One is that it's a concerto for clarinet, but also for saxophone. That is to say that the soloist must play the saxophone rather than the clarinet in the middle movement. The other thing that I find really fascinating about this piece is that it gives us a perspective on the beauty of the Canadian landscape from an outsider's point of view. I'm not suggesting that Maya Badian is any longer an outsider. She has been with us for 10 years. But she wasn't schooled in the traditions of Harry Summers and Harry Friedman and other people who have defined for us how the musical rendition of the Canadian landscape ought to sound. And as a result, this one sounds quite different and very effective. One favorite of mine is the Concerto for Violin. It was written originally for Jean-Jacques Cantereau, whom, as you may know, was a great French violinist. I would call him one of the greatest violinists in the world, probably certainly in the top 10, maybe a bit higher than that. The fact that he would commission a work from Maya Badian was enough in itself to get me interested in her music, and it is not a disappointing piece. It has been performed a number of times in Europe, but never in North America. Before I get on to the final one here, I'd like to mention a piece that, or a collection of pieces, it's 12 or 14, I think, pieces for students, piano students. My children love them. One of them is learning to play the easiest of them, and I'm sure that they'll progress through the whole book as the years go by. But they're very wonderful little pieces, much in the manner of Bartók. I should add, much in the manner of Bartók's music for children, perhaps not things like the Allegro Barbero and some of the fiercer music like that. One piece that I haven't heard, neither has anyone else, is called the Cantata Canada. It was written just a few years ago. It was written actually on the occasion of the 125th anniversary of Canada. This is a secular cantata, or as we often say, a cantata profana, for mixed choir and orchestra. And it's based on Canadian folk material. It looks to be a very fine work. It's an expensive sort of thing to produce, and we can only hope that in the near future some conductor and orchestra and sponsor will take an interest in it to mount the work, because is certainly, I think, a very fine tribute of a new Canadian to their new country. And being from the pen of an immigrant composer, that is to say, someone who has adopted our country as her own, I think it's especially significant and gives us quite perspective on how others see us and why the feelings that others have upon becoming Canadians. But let's get back to the Holocaust Symphony for a moment, just before I turn you over to Dr. Badian. Just a few personal comments about this. As a non-Jew, but someone who has been very moved by the historical reality of the Holocaust, I have often wondered why the very few musical statements made about that terrible epic of history have all been difficult of access. Schoenberg wrote a piece, for example, and some other very avant-garde composers have treated it. But somehow there has never been a, shall we say, a mainstream, and by mainstream I mean a composition written to commemorate the Holocaust that can speak to just the average music lover without a lot of intellectual preparation. I think that this is a wonderful achievement on Dr. Badian's part, but more than that, more than being an expertly crafted piece of music and a statement on a very important thing, I think that this is filling a badly neglected area of music, of the musical repertoire. I think that in particular people will certainly find new insights into the range of emotions that this horrible event, and for most of us now, of course, it is not a living memory, but a historical fact. It is something belonging to the generation of our parents, and yet it is something we must never forget. And if artists do not, in the first place, commemorate this the Holocaust, and in the second place do so in such a way that they can reach the consciousness of the general public, I think we are in risk of forgetting. But anyone who listens to Dr. Badian's symphony is most unlikely to forget.
And now I will present you Holocaust in Memoriam Symphony and some aspects of its composition processes.
My memories go to Romania when in December 1986 I read that Elie Wiesel was awarded the Nobel Prize for Peace. His expression on the picture published in the Romanian Jewish newspaper seemed to invite me to deepen my knowledge of him. I was very touched by the destiny of this person who, born in 1928 in Romania, where I was born too, had survived the concentration camps during the Holocaust, being, as other Jews, the eyewitness of the unmindful, wild murder of their closest, dearest, most cherished ones. This image, this human being, struggled and exists, fought and survived. Elie Wiesel is a bystander, as he had confessed. I remained in life to be witness and to divulge. He became the Holocaust survivor's symbol. Reading his novel, The Fifth Son, I suddenly heard within myself a powerful, an obsessive music, a music asking to be written, to become a musical statement dedicated to Elie Wiesel and in the memory of Holocaust victims. I was deeply inspired. Then questions as how will Elie Wiesel recognize that music is dedicated to him? What could be in my music the unifying emblem for both victims and survivors? And others nourished more and more my thought and my music. So I came to the idea to use in my symphony two themes as an obsession of life and death. The first one, symbolizing life, is inspired by Hora Lunga, a folk melody from Sighetul Marmatiei, Transylvania, Romania. It recalls the place where Wiesel was born. This theme's multiple returns, works up, as well as the use of various orchestral procedures, suggest deteriorated memories, broken images, and destroyed perceptions in one's mind and soul. This marks the beginning of Holocaust in Memoriam Symphony. Then fragments of it, this symbol of life, are superimposed to the theme I initially heard within myself. I invite you to hear a fragment of it. For the second theme, I used as source of inspiration the song From Suffering Through Hope to Victory, which Jews murmured in the concentration camps. This, in my symphony, symbolizes death. It converges in a full orchestra appearance of both despair and hope. I invite you to listen the final section where this theme achieves its most intense expression in my symphony. As you will perceive, the meaning of the last 5 chords is never Holocaust.